As we await Sister Song's arrival, child stars, you'll listen to my tale, please stay. As it was told to me by my sister afar, Earth her name, and this is her story. Sister Moon, hear me now, fear my end too soon, soon. My wounds are deep, gaping, unhealing, can't believe, refuse to believe my children have no feelings for me. See them sealing a fate of early death and destruction. Watch my foolish daughters and sons as they kill me, slowly kill me, quicker kill me. They loved me as would an unfaithful lover, part-time and half-assed. Now unmasked, they're deceived. No more sweet, sneaky thrill-seekings tomorrow brings. Nevers and nothings, ended days for my world and its unchanging ways. Now, apocalyptic truths of revelations hasten our omega.
We would like to just thank everyone for being with us today. Welcome to the Mayor's Office of Cultural Economy Embrace the Culture virtual series. I'm really thrilled to be with everyone today. My name is Gia Hamilton. I am the curator of Welcome to the Afrofuture Ground Zero, which is a traveling exhibition that features the work of artists of African descent that explore notions of Blackness in the future in a time-space continuum. We were just listening to the sounds of the sonic alchemist, Funke, or DJ Funke, as she is also known, who was with us back in 2018 when Welcome to the Afrofuture first made its debut in Miami for Art Basel. And that was really exciting because we were able to work with 25 artists from the Global South, mostly from New Orleans, in a Black neighborhood in Overtown in Miami during Art Basel to really activate that space. And then later, in 2019, Welcome to the Afrofuture Ground Zero made its way to New Orleans, to the New Orleans African American Museum that had just recently opened and was on view for probably about 9 or 10 months, that featured 33 artists from across the country who were also dealing with these notions of Blackness and futurism, our body, our space, our conceptual spaces, digital spaces, but very specifically, the way we think about this place, New Orleans, where we are currently, and the way in which we think about time and space and tools, and the way in which the mechanics of Afrofuturism function here in the city. So I have the pleasure today of speaking with two of the artists who are, I have to say, near and dear to my heart. These are two very powerful women visually. Their presence is just incredible whenever you're in a room with them. I know digitally they're going to shine. And so we're going to be talking today about their work, their lives, the way in which their experiences shape the work that they make, and just really unpacking these ideas of Afrofuturism, right? There are lots of ideas out there, and we want to make sure that everyone in the audience really has an opportunity to kind of better understand the concept of Afrofuturism, because one of the things that I will say as a curator is that, you know, it had become very trendy to think about Black bodies and Black spaces as a way to sort of commodify, you know, those bodies and spaces. And so I love it when Black artists get a chance to speak for themselves about their work, the complexities, and to really add some dynamism to the conversation. So I'm going to introduce the two artists, but I want them to speak about their work themselves. Soraya Jean-Louise, who I've known for probably now 10 years, waving and saying hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Gia, for organizing this. Thank you to the mayor, to Embrace the Culture. This has been really an interesting and really sweet process to shift and to align with what the times bring us, which is true in true form of what an Afro, for me, I say Afrofem future looks like. It's really about adaptability. And this is one of the ways that we have to adapt. And so I'm grateful that we can make this work.
Yes, thank you for being with us. And I have, I would say on my screen to the left, the beautiful and talented multi-dimensional artist, Felice G. Felice.
Hi, greetings, everyone. It's definitely a very humbling experience to be here with this sharing of space through this virtual reality. And just like Soraya said, thank you so much to the mayor's office and also to Gia for this opportunity to speak through these times right now where speaking and conversation and communication and even interaction is been forced into this strange space. So as I continue to reimagine space, right? Like that's kind of what Afrofuturism is: Black people, Black artists, people of the African diaspora, reimagining who we are. It's just amazing to be here with you guys to discuss that and to also have fun.
Indeed. So nice.
So I want to frame this as we are here to have fun, right? And if you've been on a panel with me before or any sort of engagement publicly, you know how important it is that we show up as our whole selves, especially as Black women. And I want to kind of shout out the fact that all of us are mothers and mothers to be.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we've done everything in our nature to make sure that we have the focus and attention of our audience, but we are mothers, right? And we have to attend to those things that come up while we're all at home and thinking about our environment. So I just want to set that tone for the audience. And again, if you've ever been in a panel with me, it feels really important for those conversations to remain authentic and accepting of who we are in our multidimensional spaces. So I was remiss because I did not shout out. I shouted out Mayor Latoya Cantrell, who's just been a fierce supporter of our culture, and want to thank her. But I also want to shout out the director of the cultural economy, Lisa Harris, and her fierce team member, and my sister, Alana Harris, who have worked to really put this on, Ashley Stagg and Eric Oburn, who were really the kind of technical folks that have helped to make this happen. And then, of course, my own project manager and an incredible media artist, Riley Tehan, who is on with us today, really helping produce this. So we would be remiss if we didn't shout those people out.
So much gratitude, especially to Ashley today, who drove, did a drop drop off for me to have an iPad that was functioning because I was having issues, technical issues.
Oh, that's so
So
nice.
that was really, really sweet. And I do really appreciate, like I said, it was so nice to have, not effortless, but to have a lot of care and thoughtfulness into putting this together. So I'm grateful.
Absolutely. So I want to also, before we get started, just digging in, let everyone know that we're going to give you the link to Funkay's Soundscape. It's a 2-hour soundscape, and if you are like me, dance is ephemeral. It is about connecting with spirit, with your body, with the kind of vortex that is all around us, and it really feels really like being able to be reborn. And I have to say, Funkay is one of my favorite DJs, and she, for lack of a better term, just brings the spirit. And you, on your rainy Friday afternoon and evening, will be able to sit back, relax, and truly connect with your inner self, and also connect with Funkay. So we look forward to sharing that link with you so that you can download this soundscape. It is absolutely a part of this exhibition. So we want to thank her work in this show, and for just starting us off by setting the tone.
Yes.
Um, if you all would actually, like, how you describe your work, because artist is a term now that it just it brings up a lot of things for an artist to actually claim that term. And so I'd love for you to just share how you think about your work and how you describe your work. What really is the impetus, the origin point that drives your work? Soraya, do you want to share
Oh,
instead?
yeah, I'd love to jump in. This is always kind of challenging for me to describe my own work, so please bear with me. Um, Initially, I was definitely calling myself, or at least looking at my work in the catalog of Afrofuturism, right? I think it definitely is there. And a couple of years ago, as I really tried to be intentional about how I was expressing and identifying, I started to see some threads that were missing from just the general umbrella term of Afrofuturism for me, right? Um, and so a couple of years ago, I started calling my work Afrofem Futurism or Afrofem Futurity. And I wanted to be very clear about the Black feminist living reality and some of the theory that's part of how I live, of who I am, of my identity, right? And just claiming an Afro futurist identity wasn't enough for me. And so I had to like really expand that. And I thought it fitting because that's what Black feminism does, right? It allows space and room for expansion, again, for adaptability, for being spiritual and cerebral. And so I wanted to encompass all of those layers, all of that onion that is me into the work and into my own identity, and be really true to how I actually live my life, right? One of the things that I always see that I want to uh, make a joke that we have this in common, Dia, and I never get to, and I get to now, so I'm excited, is the fact that we both have backgrounds in anthropology, right? And so that's really
Mm.
fascinating to me and that we're mothers, that we're Black women, that we're Black feminist identified people on this planet in this capitalistic, uh, you know, patriarchal experiment, right? This white supremacist experiment, living, raising children, and actually trying to create content that is archivable. Like our lives are just all the receipts we need, right? And so specifically from my background as a medical anthropologist, as I started visually applying my practice a little bit later than most, right? But still, it's been over 15 years now, but it was still a little later. And so it was really important for me to categorize all of those identities and to really speak truth and power to all of the different many hats that I wear, but that the art is not just cerebral, it is spiritual, right? It is ephemeral, it is meaningful, it has impact, that it is a revelation of my fears, some of my wishes, some of my dreams. And it also is really about what myself as a Haitian born, and that's the other thing that's important to my identity, a Haitian born artist. And shout out because it is Haitian Heritage Month. And we are on the weekend of Mother's Day weekend, right? On Sunday is Mother's Day, which we know Mother's Day is all day. But I think it's really auspicious that we're doing this at this time, and that really that means something. And so I don't take that into for lightness. So it really is important for me to encompass all of those things into my work. So you will get Black feminism, you will get spirituality, you will get Haitianness, you will get Black woman queerness, you will get the future, you will also get the past, because I think that's important as well, right? I don't think that having this identity as an Afrofemme futurist means that we have to leave the past behind. I think that that would be a mistake. I think that would be us not really valuing what our ancestors and what our own lived experiences have taught us. We're not leaving it behind. It is changing. I remember you were on a panel with us many years ago, Gia, and I'm trying to remember exactly what you said verbatim, but I'm not. But I remember you talking about stepping into the portal is the moment, right? If I'm paraphrasing that correctly, that the portals are where we are in the moment, right? And that shifts because the moment keeps shifting. That's what's so wonderful about thinking about Afrofem futurism in that way, that it keeps changing and we are responding to those shifts. Now, the past is not the past because we know that time for us doesn't move in these linear ways, right? It's not one line. It's a circle. It's a swirl. It's all of it. It's the vortex. It's everything, and it's nothing at the same time. If that makes sense. And so I think it's really interesting to be in this moment. I think for me, shifting maybe a little bit and making more meaning out of the work, right? I think it's a wonderful question. Thank you.
Absolutely, because again, we're talking about like artwork and artists in the context of an industry, right?
Right.
And it feels important for us to extract ourselves from that, so that we can have a different kind of conversation. So I really appreciate just going into depth. I think about you talked about like the showing up in all of these, five-dimensional ways, right, that we show up. And I feel like Felice, when you talk about your work, tell me a little bit about how all of these aspects of yourself, show up.
Vortex, because Gia used the word vortex in one of our like personal conversations about my work and called it a healing vortex, and it completely changed the shift of how I wanted to present my work. I'm a DJ, I'm a yoga teacher. Those are my two main gigs during regular life. And I believe that I breathe and I move as an artist, but those are two things that are really important to me as a means to serve. I come from a long line of activists. I come from a long line of people who gave back to the community. And the work that I will be presenting or talking about in a couple minutes was simply me coming back from college and looking around my community and being confused and actually also feeling depressed. Um, and I just wanted to serve. I wanted to show in my own way from my heart what I felt. And so a lot of my work is actually experimental because I didn't go to school for visual arts. I didn't go to school for documentation. I didn't go to school for photography. I just kind of pick up things and I play around and I learn and I create that way. Um, and space has always been very important to me because I also used to dance. I was like dance captain in high school and I was musical theater. I actually wanted to be on Broadway when I was ever since a little girl. So using space and using a stage and reimagining um, how we can recreate in that way has always been very natural to me. So um, I believe that as a DJ, kind of not control, I don't want to say control, right? But I manage space and through music and through yoga. I encourage people to use more space and to honor their space and to breathe in more air so that they can feel more space within themselves. And through my art, I just kind of, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But it's also one of those things that I, just really appreciate how people have been engaging with my work. So just like Soraya said too, it's always very interesting to talk about me as an artist because I believe everyone's an artist. My mom's a super dope engineer, and her mind is so profound. Um, and she looks at numbers and she does things with it, and I'm like, how? And that's art to me as well. So I think we're all artists, but I think definitely within my artist work, it's reimagining the sacred space and how, especially as Black people, can reclaim our space.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think you're both right. You both touched on this kind of like this personal, which I think artists are so good, right? Like artists as empath, artists as really being in touch with, the sort of environments that we're in, and but artists specifically, those who kind of claim that as their term, really are taking in things and processing it through their own personal, experiences, their bodies, their minds, their spirits, and then putting out these kind of ideas that are unique to them, right? And so, just around the notion of Afrofuturism, there's a lot of conflict and tension around that term. I mean, Soraya, you started to touch on that. I know that if you look up Wikipedia, um, and you look up what is Afrofuturism, which maybe some of you are doing right now at home, what comes up is troubling and kind of in conflict with what you all may or I may experience as a person who's engaged in this everyday work. And so I don't want to encourage people to go and see this other definition, but I'd like for us to maybe start to talk about what this term kind of means, what you think it might not mean, or what doesn't it include, and how does it progress? What does it look like? What did it look like when you first kind of claimed that term or thought about that term, and kind of what does it look like now? Felice, do you want to share?
Man, loaded question. I believe that I actually didn't think about Afrofuturism until I was in your exhibit in Miami and I was helping you out and really seeing the other artists and how their art expressed kind of like the new Black, quote unquote. Um, it was really transformative for me. And at first, I'm not gonna lie, I saw Afrofuturism as kind of like this sci-fi way of creating and reimagining also that just kind of like how a lot of people love Octavia Butler and how she uses sci-fi and that kind of like um way of reimagining how Black people are in general. We're not just one dimensional, we're not even two dimensional, we're multifaceted. So I think Afrofuturism redefines who we are and also advocates for the misconception of who we are as well.
Yeah, I think a lot about liberated spaces, and how limiting, I have to say English is, right, for us. And
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
so
especially
it's
if you're bilingual or multilingual, for
exactly,
sure.
it's
Yeah.
always trying to find a term that can most accurately describe an experience, but as you mentioned earlier, right, it's always shifting and changing. So Soraya,
Yeah.
like, yeah, what are your ideas about like the notions of Afrofuturism, and like you said, you've had to shift, right? And
Had
and
to shift it.
yeah.
You have to make it work for you. So what I'll say is, for those who will do the Google searches, which for sure, educate yourselves and be cautious. One of the things that I love about our our matriarch Octavia E. Butler, is that she calls us in to be aware of what's happening in the environment, to be cautionary, to be prepared as much as we can be, and to be really open to how things will just change, will shift, right? That being said, it's really important for us to FUBU it, for us by us, define us for ourselves. And I don't mean to be corny in that sense, but it's real, it's powerful, right? So that when you do look up the term Afrofuturism, you will see that the person that is credited for coming up with this nomenclature is not a black person, right? It's not a person of the diaspora, and in fact is credited in a misleading, misguided, and unfortunate way, because at the time that this was coined in the 90s, there were definitely black artists, black scholars, black healers, black spiritualists already laying down this framework. This notion of Afrofuturism, as coined by this person, which will remain nameless because I'm not doing that, um, is does not honor and does not really give a lot of reverence to what our histories are, right? And how those histories are different. For example, one of the issues that I did have earlier on with Afrofuturism, as it was presented in the beginning, and especially at the time that I kind of found identity in that, because I think it takes time, right? For me, at least, the process took time. You have already been living your best life. You've been doing this life. You've been a healer. You've been a mama. You've been doing this life, and all of a sudden, there's a name for it, right? And when I say that, I think about the ways that Black feminism had always worked in that sense as well. My grandmother and great grandmother and even mother did not have a name of Black feminism, but they had already been living those lives, and this is part of the the say challenge sometimes with theory, because theory is not based on lived actual inner lived lives, right? It's based on kind of a question, a knowledge, or an interest in a thing that kind of can be researched, and you can base it on some loose stories. But what about our real inner lives? So we had already been doing this thing, right? One of the things that Afrofuturism missed for me early on was its lack of Afro Caribbean diasporic representation, right? So it came from this very African American lens. It also missed this African diasporic African representation. And so we were often left out of that conversation, of that description. The other thing that was not there for me is that I always knew, not just from my own background as a medical anthropologist and a mama and an artist, that we live in multiples. We are multiples, right? And so living, holding space for Afrofuturism and holding space for Afropessimism is not a binary or a dualism that is in contradiction to what how we live and what we say we how we say we live our lives, right? So that I can be definitely questioning uh, Black death and also think about Black futures. That those things do not mutually exclude one another from the conversation. And I think earlier on, there were a lot of folks trying to do that, trying to create lines of division around that. That always made me uncomfortable. And again, I had to lean into Black feminism, my own lived experience, women that I knew, my relationships with Black women, my relationships with brown women, to really, really peel back the onion and say, wow, like this is actually way bigger than what it implies, right? It's not just about us in the future and robotics, which is great. It's not just about us in a apocalyptic setting. Black people have always been in apocalyptic settings. Like, let's stop. That's just, we know this, right? And we've also survived, and we've also experienced Black joy, and we've also been reverent and spiritual and present. So that also didn't work for me, right? Kind of like Afrofuturism saying that it wasn't linear, but being kind of linear in its invitation or in its offering, and limiting. That felt very limiting to me, and I wasn't really there for that, right? And so it did definitely take the work of powerful Black feminists, like Octavia Butler, Felice so graciously mentioned, to really add another level so that I could level up into my own identity and to give myself credit for that identity. We are shamed, we were shamed. I was a teen mom, and once a teen mom, I guess always a teen mom, right? I'm 43 years old, and I have a 26-year-old son who's my eldest, my firstborn. There's a lot of shame around that. But for that to be my identity is not shameful. For anything that I've experienced is not shameful, right? That shows up in the work. That makes me who I am. And that's ever changing. So why is there not space to speak to my Haitianness and Afrofuturism, right? Why is there not space to talk about my Africanness or my longing to understand my Africanness in a different way that Afrofuturism was presenting, right? A very kind of like Black American way. And like you said, Gia, which is, and I say this often, I'm happy that you said, I appreciate it as a jumping point. English is so freaking limiting. It is so limiting. And we have all the words. We have all the words for days, and it's still super limiting. Now, imagine if you are bilingual, as I am, speaking multiple languages and thinking in multiple languages. That's really interesting too and powerful. How does that come through in my relationship to the work, my relationship to community, my relationship as a mother, right? Like, how does that show itself? And so, the question is really powerful, and we're still learning from that. As Felice, I think, said it. We thought sci-fi. It was sci-fi for a minute, and now even that language has changed, and that changed because of Black and brown women, right? Now it is speculative. It is us asking questions. It's the speculation, and that's even more beautiful and more expansive than saying just sci-fi could ever be, right? So I'm grateful to be in this moment, in this time, experiencing this work and how it changes and how it changes me.
I'm so incredibly, this is just like the conversation I want to have on a Friday.
No, I know. I'm so happy about it.
Yeah, you all just like radiating and breaking it down. Because it's so interesting again to take this. We're all at home,
That's right.
and to take this a step forward, like we're in the midst of this global pandemic, right, as it's called. And as we're thinking about the future of ourselves, our bodies, our babies, our things that we give birth to, I'm curious about what each of your thoughts are about how this futurist work fits into the context of like the now, where social distancing is the strategy, right, to sort of bypass some of the issues around spreading this illness. And so how is that influencing you right now as an artist? Like, what are you thinking about, and how do you think that might impact some work that you're making, or the way that you're thinking about making work? I didn't give that to anyone specifically, but I'd love for both to answer that.
Um, I think for me, it was pretty easy to kind of adapt to this way of living because I'm naturally just really comfortable at home. I'm naturally more prone to feeling the sacredness in chosen solitude, right? I'm natural to that, and so that part hasn't been necessarily that challenging for me. Not that I don't miss outside and I don't miss people, I do. Um, the, the cautionary part is definitely something been that has added anxiety, I think, for all of us, especially if you're parenting little people or big people, parenting anybody and caregiving for people, right? So as a caregiver, that definitely impacted and shifted the way that I would have a regular day. Um, I'm a teaching artist, and I can't teach or at least facilitate. I don't like even the word teach, but I can't facilitate building an artistic practice in the same way that I'm accustomed to, right? Everything is digital now, it's different. And so there's a lot of ways that we have to respond to this that are new, but they're not new, right? So there are millions of people, outliers, people that live on the borders and on the boundaries of all kinds of life that looks like this, right? For whatever reason, it looks like this. And I want to say that I think being a Black woman definitely was a preparation and practice that helped me to really step into this, because we know how to do that, I think. And I don't want to be generalizing, but I want to also honor that most of the Black and brown women that I know, we know how to live this kind of life, right? We know how to care for people. We know how to prepare for certain things. We know how to rise to all kinds of occasions. And so this felt like an opportunity to kind of flex on what we already do and what we know, and also how we build community with folks. And even if we didn't know those things, we knew that we had a community that we can lean on and call upon to really support us in this moment. And I think artistry, how has impacted my artistry, is that I'm really thinking about. I think visually, my work is serious. I have work that has more levity to it, but for the most part, I would think that my work is serious, and I want to, in the seriousness of my work, I want to infuse a lot more of the Black joy, of the pleasure, of the levity, of those tools that are survivalist tools that help us get over, get up, get under, and get through. Right. Um, if you look at a lot of the past work, it definitely is a reflection of the past, grappling with, again, I don't want to speak in a linear way, but again, language fails us. So I have to go past to go forward to go present, right? So that the work is doing all those things. And I'm being more intentional. Fortunately, I do have work up at Ashe Culture Center that went up during this whole situation, and we know the decision was made not to gather and not to open it to the public, which was a hard decision to make, but we had already installed the work. That work is a combination of more of the joy and the pleasure infused with some of the older work that I haven't gotten a lot of traction or exhibition from. And so I was excited to do that for that reason. And this happened. It's going to be up. We'll get to, I believe we'll get to see it at some point when outside is safe again. And it's really interesting to see how exhibitions now, and Gia, you can speak to this more than I can, how we have to think of things in this virtual digital realm that we may have never had to think about before. And also, for the folks that I mentioned who had already been living these lives, Black and brown women have always been the first women to say, honey, that's not going to work, or that's not working, right? This system in this state of collapse was never normal. So I push back when I hear things like the new normal, because it was never normal. And we know this, right? We just kind of adapted, we adjusted to maintain, to live, to have a day to day. That's fine. No one is judging you on that, right? And Black and brown women have always been at the foundation of saying this is not going to work. This is not sustainable, right? So now that we're seeing how our educational system responds to this, how our jobs respond to this, how our medical infrastructures respond to this, right? So we'll see a whole surge, and we're seeing it now. It's been what, 8 weeks now, and there is a difference in how some infrastructural things are moving. There's a lot of hiccups. There's a lot of things to iron out, and we're not going to get it right immediately. We don't have it right. We've been living in this regime forever, and now it's like, wow, this is on its last legs. How do we step up and respond to this? And so I want to give credit to the Black and brown women who always knew that this was true, that this was not sustainable, who always know how to maneuver and shapeshift and really address a lot of these issues that a lot of us have always had, right? And not just, again, these identities are multiple. So black and queer, you know, uh, our trans, like every single identity that you can think of, always said this is not a good look. This is not going to happen, right? This is not a good look for us. And so
This
it's
is
really interesting to see how
transparency.
we shift the work.
Absolutely. Felice, what are you thinking about? Because I there's so many things, right? And I'll just before I let you speak, I'll say I don't know about you all, but it is a real it forces you into the present, right? Where like one day is not an indicator of how the next day will be. And to
Mm.
your point about being flexible and adaptable, and those of us who, push back against the kind of really binary, rigid aspects of life that we know are not real, right? That are kind of like a part of this matrix. So I'm curious. That's what I've been thinking. I rewatched The Matrix the other day. Just right. I think you might be on mute. So Felice, yeah. So what
Jesus.
about
Yeah.
as your work, and yeah, what you're thinking about, dreaming about, or even maybe struggling or having some tension about?
Mm. I think it's been a phase of just reassessing everything and trying my best to stay as centered as possible. But as you know, but not everyone, but I'm like, expecting in literally probably like 4 days. It feels like, and I've been really just not even overwhelmed, but more so the sheer fact of how the society looks at Black motherhood has been like so shocking. And not even saying that I'm from a Black woman, I was raised around Black women, but Black motherhood and being pregnant during this pandemic has been like a highlight. And as a yoga teacher, I'm trying my best to, hold space for a lot of women through prenatal yoga classes at the moment. But even then, it's so interesting having conversations with these women, and just in this time being forced into a space where we kind of have to not only reassess but restructure our birth plans. We have to restructure how even we have to reanalyze how hospitals are even dealing with our bodies. And so that in itself is like, you know, our our womb is in our sacral chakra. And if you're into chakras, this is the energy center that's in the hips. And this is where our creativity is sourced. This is where our creativity of self. I got excited. Creativity of how we create in the tangible, the creative thoughts. So as we are sitting here, also creating life, it's just been blowing my mind how spectacular we are and how resilient we are, especially as Black midwives, Black doulas, and how that support has also gained a little bit more recognition. Um, and so a lot of my time has been about um, relaxing, but also still using my voice and also using how I interact with myself even and this child during this time. And it's just been, it's, like I mentioned before, this sacred space. I'm encouraging everyone, just create your sacred space. What does that look like for you right now? Maintain it in the most, easy way as you can. And even on days when it's not easy, cool. And a lot of that reassessment has also been letting go, detaching from it all, detaching from any expectations that I feel like I need to uphold for myself, detaching from even how, I have a book full of notes that I, was planning to say for this interview, but have I said any of it? Probably not. But it's there, So detaching and just having, I don't want to say having fun, but being as present as I can, and knowing that I'm doing the best that I can, and knowing that my artwork is the best that I had at that time, and that creation is what I produced. It is out in the world, and I can always create more. I can always create something better, or not even better, right? Because not to level anything, but I could just, creativity is always running, you know? So that's kind of what I've been thinking, you know? And also knowing that creativity is also sitting and breathing. I don't have to wake up and think that my to-do list has to be, everything has to be checked off. Um, and I know Gia, I worked with you, girl. I know. I hope you're resting. I hope you two are resting, you know, you guys. I hope you have that support as well. And that's another one. That's another word. Support has been actually very like relevant and prevalent, versus like what happens in the real world when we always have these distractions. And I think everyone's sitting down and actually, like, how many times have you talked to your mama in a day? You know, that doesn't really happen that much, you know, like in quote unquote regular life, you know, pre-pandemic. So I think this pandemic is really shifting the paradigm. Like, if you read the news, nature is even blooming and blossoming right now. Like, there's so many animals that are coming outside, and the trees look more healthier. And I think maybe even the CO2 count kind of went down. So there's so much happening that is beautiful, and I've just been trying my best to look at that more so than, you know, the things and the devastations that have been happening. So balance. I'll end it with that word, balance.
Yes, yes, yes. I actually, Felice is speaking to my role oftentimes as an administrator, right, within arts institutions, right, where the checklist or the to-do list is paramount. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
production of, and that's super important, right? We had people that helped to produce this. So I don't want to discredit that, but the being in the flow, um, the being in the flow of your creativity, of your restoration, of your connectivity is definitely
Mm.
something I have
That's right.
appreciated during this time. You know, just to allow things to come up, and for me to work through certain peculiarities, right, that are really nuanced that I don't have an answer to, right? That, as you said earlier, Soraya, the speculation of, or the supposing, well, what if? What does this mean? And then having to go back to some sort of a center around, um, I know that I know that I know, right? So I don't have to be in a state of worry, but I do have to be in a state of like open compassion for all the myriad of things that are happening for people, both, you know, beautiful and tragic. So that's where I've been,
Mm.
you know, in this creative practice, and in a space of like forgiveness, like really
Right.
like, and acceptance. Like every day I'm not gonna want to wake up and you know do this. Sometimes I just need to wake up and like go and take a walk to the bayou and, you know, spend the day in the park, and that actually is feeding something else that can be supportive, both to me and to others. So, you know, I wanted to take a moment because I know we've been able to look at each other and the audience has been able to look at us, and we're beautiful.
We're so gorgeous, darling.
Right? So much. And I
Yes.
also want to give us an opportunity to look at some of the work. So I'm going to share my screen. This might take just a second. Felice, as I share my screen, will you intro us into this piece? This is one of your pieces that was actually in Welcome to the Afrofuture. Will you share the name of the piece and maybe just a little bit about the piece, and then we're going to go into it and listen.
No doubt. Yes. This is a multimedia piece installation that I created at the New Orleans African American Museum for the Afrofuture exhibit. And basically, I put together clips of different B-rolls that I collected for the past 8 years. I've been documenting gentrification in both Bed-Stuy and New Orleans, both I call homes, but definitely, you know, I'm originally from Brooklyn, and that's where everything started. And like I mentioned before, I am kind of like a healing vortex of kind of passionate information and space. And I have certain tools that I just wanted to share through meditation. So this is a meditation that I created alongside some visuals that I put together based off of gentrification and how we can all just center into our space. Ultimately, for me, it went from um, analyzing gentrification in a very logical sense to analyzing gentrification in a spiritual sense. And that for me was very transformational. And ultimately, it was just a lack of mindfulness, quote unquote, I say. Gentrification is a lack of mindfulness of space. And us as, indigenous people of our lands, we must reclaim our space. And what does that look like? Who knows? I think we're all actually starting it. I've seen a lot of people growing gardens and, during this pandemic and really reclaiming our space, reclaiming our food, policies, all that. So here it is.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so we're all gonna be able to listen to this excerpt of Felice's piece.
Where is this space located? What are the colors? How does it smell? Begin to visualize yourself enjoying the familiarity of this sacred space, a place you call your own. Repeat after me, I am home. Take another deep, intentional breath and sink deeper into your space. Sacred? How do we specify what is sacred? Space. How does one connect to the space around us? How does space influence our emotions? In this universe, we either create or we destroy.
Felice will just take a minute and listen to segment 2 as well.
Stay in your peace. Simply observe. Envision the invader completely taking over, removing items, repainting, rebuilding on top of everything you kept sacred, confining you only to breathe in between the lines of your red box. But we are here. So take another deep breath with me, inhaling deeply for 1, 2, 3, and hold. And exhale, HA. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Gathering ourselves, preparing to reclaim our space, allowing our vibrant red aura to exude our pores into our space, allowing that invader to no longer feel comfortable.
So I'd like to just take a minute, honestly, just to have Soraya. I know that you also lived in. I know that you also lived in New York City. Sorry, everybody. I think I may have kept something on. Soraya, I know that you also lived in New York City, and have had the experience of living in multiple places. And so I'm always curious to get other artists commenting on each other's work. And so I'd love to hear some thoughts from you about maybe any of the things that felt familiar or any of the things that felt new or just interesting.
So Felice, that was really powerful and really, really beautiful. And I'm so thankful for your vision and your intention to create something so beautiful and so powerful, to ask those really important questions. So it's really, really it felt instantly happy for me to see home, right? So my family, I was born in Haiti and raised between Haiti, Harlem, and Brooklyn. My family immigrated first from Haiti to Harlem, and then from Harlem to Brooklyn. And so that's where I spent all of my adult life. I went to Brooklyn College. I went to Catholic high schools. I went to Catholic elementary schools. And so Brooklyn, specifically Flatbush Avenue, I saw the spot. I saw the little moment that you showed, Nostrand Avenue and Bed-Stuy. Like those places are home to me, and so it felt really beautiful. And I think your intention was to show the sacredness of these places. It is a sacred experience for me to witness that. So thank you so much for that powerful uh, offering. It's what it is, right? I think our work is grounded in not just creating for the sake of boredom. And I would actually go as far as to say that most artists I know who are embedded in their work in a very specific way, like we don't even entertain words like boredom. What do you mean bored? Like we have the reality of the topography of our minds, right? Of our imagination. And so boredom may look like a different thing. And specifically for me, I'm not I'm not bored, right? Like I actually think boredom in this context, in this moment, I see it as something that is used mostly in privileged settings or from privileged people who have had a lot of time, money, and space. I love this word space coming into this space to really do what they will, right? And I think it's fine. You should do what you will, but how this moment is helping us to reflect on how we spend our time and what time and space and sacredness means to us. Um, One of the things that Felice said early on that I really love, and it felt like it was it was like an audio of my own voice saying that everyone is creator. I've said this so much throughout my teaching artistry, through my facilitation, whether it's in visual scholarship or it's in healing or it's in medical anthropology, my academic, more cerebral. It is embedded in who we are. It is our birthright, creativity. We are all born with this powerful um, mechanism, this tool to create, right? It is actually grounded in who we are. The issue comes when we don't have the support and the community or the people that we care about to really advocate and root for us and to help us to cultivate that creativity. I'm blessed to come from a family of healers and artists, and so witnessing that work came full circle because I came from that, right? And that's a blessing. But many of us don't come from that, and we fight. We fight against what is natural because we have not had the grounding and the support in cultivating that part of ourselves. And so, yes, it is who we are. It is our birthright. Let your babies, let yourselves in this moment create in the ways, and Felice said it again, create in the ways that feel lovely, that feel regenerative, that feel pleasurable to you. As a visual scholar, visual artist, it doesn't mean that I'm always constantly imagining and creating new work, right? Sometimes that looks like I'm cooking a bomb ass meal for my children, for myself. It looks like I'm getting myself together, right? I'm adorning the first sacred space. And I love the question that Elise asked in her piece, what is sacred space, right? And I would, and my counter or my response to that would be that you are sacred space, that the first sacred space that you know is yourself. That's the altar of yourself, right? Not altar as in to shift, but that can also be part of that language, but altar as a revered sacred space. And so there are many ways to do that. You know, like Felice mentioned, people are gardening now, people are reading, people are creating all kinds of content that have nothing to do, which we've always done, with capitalism, that have nothing to do with how much we'll earn, just out of the sheer joy because we know that joy is an answer. Joy is healing. Joy is how we combat, and joy is how we are responsible and responsive to tragedy. You know, we are not short of knowing what it is to be traumatized. We know what it is to be traumatized. We know it, we see it, we are responsive to it, right? And we have to get into a practice of doing those things for ourselves, for our families, for our community, just because. So I'm thankful for the opportunity.
Elise, I know for both of you, it's hard to sometimes look at your work or listen to your work after you've made it. I know I get to work with a lot of you. Sometimes through the process, you and I, Felice, worked closely through this process for this particular piece. And I'm wondering, as you watched it again, like with us, with the audience, with Soraya, um, what came up for you watching and listening to yourself and seeing those images? Let's see, Elise, can you hear me? Your audio quite on. All right, we might be having a technical issue there. We'll see if we can't get that taken care of. Um, so for right now, how about Soraya? We switch to like looking at some of your work while we handle some of the tech issues.
Awesome.
Okay, great. I love this idea that we're going to get to again look at some of your pieces. Soraya, so talk me through some of this work. Some of it I feel like I'm familiar with because I've seen your work for so long and really enjoyed it. But you know, you primarily, I think, are dealing a lot with mixed media, as a sort of process. But talk to me about these individual sort of images and like where you're sourcing materials from. Like, what does that look
Yes.
like for you? And what's your process for selecting? Are you kind of in research mode? Is it more organic? Talk us through this.
So I think it's definitely organic, and I'm definitely constantly. I mean, I think you spoke to this earlier, Gia, about the artist and it being the empath, right? I wouldn't claim that for all artists, but I think for most artists, and especially for Black women artists, Black and Brown women artists, there is this tapping of emotional awareness that's really necessary to do work that has that conveys a really intentional message, right? So this is just what you're looking at right now. The story behind my skin it's a snippet, a little excerpt of a larger piece, which I have shown a couple times. But again, I love this idea of going back to older work that I haven't necessarily shared a lot in exhibition with community, right? And so this work has not been shown a bunch of times, which makes it kind of new to viewers who may be just becoming new to my work. And also, it reimagines and reopens a conversation of people who have seen it but haven't seen it in a really long time, right? And definitely, you know this, to see something live up close and personal is different. It's a different experience and to experience it in a digital platform. So the story behind my skin was is a piece that came to me as I was watching. I don't know what I was watching, but I think it was a L'Oreal commercial that came on with Beyonce, right? And it was a makeup commercial, and it was not just Beyonce, but there was several different women talking about basically the story of their skin or the story behind their skin. I may not be getting that verbatim, but that really triggered something in me. It bothered me. It
Mhm.
perplexed me. It invited me in to have an explorative uh, conversation with myself, with my own skin, right? And what did that represent for myself? What did that represent in a larger context in the African diaspora? What did that represent for my family? And what did that mean, me exploring this in the current reality of being in the USA, being American, being in America, not American, but Americanized, right? and really had me thinking about, for example, one of the things that is interesting in my life, but again, this is a reality for many people. I'm still not a naturalized American citizen. Now, partially that's now as a 43-year-old woman, that's some of it is by choice. The other thing is that a lot of this costs a lot of money, which I don't have disposable income. And thinking about an American citizenship feels like a disposable income. You know what I mean? Like
Yes,
I
yes,
need
yes.
extra I need extra money to take care of this thing. And also this highlights to me the importance of why I need to take care of this thing. Not because I have necessarily this kind of allegiance to America, right? But I do understand under this political atmosphere what it means to be an immigrant, what it means to be an other in this world, how quickly and how expeditiously my rights can be revoked, right? So that is speaking to the Black woman, but that's also speaking to a Black woman who's an immigrant Black woman, right? So that there, again, there's these layers. And so I wanted to explore that in this piece. You don't see the bottom half of the piece intentionally, partly because it's really hard to capture that and send that digitally. But I also want it to be kind of like a surprise, or at least a an invitation to see it up close and personal, so that you can be like, oh wow, like there's a whole, there are layers to this story, right? And being really thoughtful about, and I love this question, G, about where I source material. So a lot of my work, uh, and this was triggered by my medical anthropology background. A lot of my work comes from National Geographic, vintage National Geographic magazines, clippings from vintage magazines, National Geographic to be specific, because as we know, if we know the history a little bit about the National Geographic platform in the past, I think they've gotten, I think they've addressed some of their issues and gotten a little better. Um, the capturing of indigenous Black and Brown people all over the world was done often without consent. Was
Yes.
done often without uh, any care. Right? We're talking about the white gaze, right? And so part of the ways that I can be subversive in my understanding and be questioning, continually questioning in my reality, is to use what was taken without honor and to repurpose it, right? This is part of why collage is such a wonderful medium, and mixed media collage is such a wonderful medium, is we have the opportunity to really reimagine, repurpose, reinvent, upscale, right? Change something into something else, and to really be in a different kind of vibe and emotional connection with that thing. And so I would spend hours and hours of like, oh, I can't stand this National Geographic nonsense. This is horrifying to me, knowing the history that I know, but also finding a peacefulness, and knowing that I can change this for myself. I can change this for viewers. I can change this for I can not necessarily rewrite this history. That's a plug to my sister, who's also an artist, Fabiola Jean-Louis, who has a wonderful exhibition series called Rewriting History, right? And so I can reimagine this history, and honor these people who often in Nat Geo were nameless. They would spend time talking about, yes, tribes and tribal wear and cultural habits and blah blah blah, but it was not done in an honoring way. And I can shift some of that remembrance so that it can become honoring.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I'm always thinking about what catches my eye in terms of kind of source material and things that I'm thinking about. And, um, you know, as you're processing and putting these pieces of history and time and space together, um, what does your creative workspace look like?
Oh my
How
God.
are you setting up that space to be able to kind of act as this alchemist of these materials? And I went on to the next slide here as you talk.
Yes, I love that question because Felice mentioned it, that she's a self-taught artist, right? Um, I'm also a self-taught artist. Like I said, I come from a family of artists. My father is an amazing artist. Both of my siblings are amazing artists, and so being an artist is not. It doesn't feel uncomfortable for me. Being in visual scholarship does not feel uncomfortable for me. I have never, ever had dedicated studio space, which is interesting. Again, part of that is about having the disposable income or having the income to have those kinds of privileges, which I'm not saying is impossible. I think if I connected with folks in community, I could have a studio space, right? And that's not saying that's not a judgment on myself or the process, but it was really important for me to do this work anyway, right? I didn't have a dedicated studio space, but I had my living room floor. I had my kitchen, right? I had the kitchen in the middle of the night where I created lovely meals for my family. And when I put the kids off to bed, I can use that kitchen. That becomes my kitchen and my studio space, right? So it was always a space at home to create. It was always a place for me to create. I would make fantastical messes and I would take care of them the best that I could. Collaging, assemblage, and installation work is really tactile work. It involves a lot of movement. It involves a lot of breath. It involves a lot of kind of just a dedication with or without, right? So I knew what I had and I knew what I can do with what I had. I don't know if it translates that well digitally here. Some of these pieces have actual objects embedded into them beyond paper. So some of these objects are metal pieces. Writing time,
Mm-hmm.
writing time has actual metal and plastic pieces embedded into the work. Um, so does the first one that you show, The Story Behind My Skin, has actual metal pieces embedded into the work. And it was really about practicing, right? Like I have this motto that I've been using forever. Um, I recently got it tattooed on myself, which I'm proud of. I don't know if you can see it, right? It says, "Practice makes possible." I was, I was
Yes.
giving myself, the grace to think about practice as possibility and not perfection. I don't believe that really exists. I think we have moments of perfection, and that's individual, and we can define that for ourselves. But what we're always in contact with is a possibility of a thing, right? And so for me, the work was really about the possibility of what I had and the narratives that I wanted to tell. A lot of people don't know this about me. My first kind of induction into creative life wasn't visual work. It was writing. I started out one of my majors in college was I was in writing. So I had big hopes to do that. And so I was always a writer. I've always been a thinker. I've always been someone who can tell a really good story. And it was really interesting to have that part of me show up in the work because these works, my intention is that these works tell a story. I'm very careful and very intentional about the naming of the work. And even in the naming of the work, that can pull in the viewer and the community to have a reflection around a story.
Yeah, narrative being so important and going back to just what you were saying in terms of like telling our own stories.
That's right.
Um, and again, stepping outside of just the use of the English language
Yes.
or even language in general, using visual cues. I noticed though, moving to the next slide, that you actually do embed language into your work. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important for you? Because I know, as we think about the canon, oftentimes, and I think about art school, there's so many sort of, I don't know, critiques around how artists embed the written word into their work. And I know there's been a lot of pushback around that. And I'm curious about how you think about embedding the written word into your collages, assemblage, and your installation.
Yes, thank you, Gia. So because language is so important to me on multiple levels, but specifically as an immigrant woman who can speak multiple language and can think in a different language, and there is some, there's some trauma and some triggering around the uses of language, especially English language for me. I wanted to be really mindful about how that might show up in the work. The other part to that is that National Geographic or any of the magazines, since I use not just National Geographic, that's the majority of where I get a lot of my more vintage imagery, especially imagery that has indigenous folks in it. That comes from National Geographic, right? One of the things that is really beautiful in collecting these types of source materials is that you will see the detail and the intention around what texts look like, right? So what words look like printed had always fascinated me. And I also had a wonderful opportunity to incorporate some of that language, some of that text in the work, right? And so it made sense that I would be mindful of not just the language that I was using, but also how I source that language.
Yeah. Yes, 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 and yes. And so talk a little bit about these two specific, these two pieces. Um,
This is powerful to me for several reasons. Let me say bye to my baby real quick. My babies. Bye. I love
Bye,
you.
babies.
Bye, baby.
You've been so
Get your
patient.
brother.
Goodbye. He's been so
Your
sweet.
mama is being a rock star.
This is Kamali. Oh, thank you, sweetie.
Okay, so we know what's happening right now with our current state of Black death and Black violence, which is never changing. Bye, baby. Can I have a kiss? Can I have a kiss goodbye? This is Nova. Bye, baby. Have fun. All right. This is me managing shared custody. I'm recently divorced, and this is managing shared custody, going off with their father. Okay.
Good. This is we said this, right? We said
We
we
did
were
say it.
whole self.
So
So
thankful that you said
good.
it. I'm so thankful you
Felice
said
is
it.
back.
Yes,
Yay.
Felice.
So we're on my shared screen, and we're having the privilege of being able to see We Will Not Be Erased, and
Yep.
we wanted more Black people. And so Felice, since you're back, I would love, as Soraya says goodbye to her sweeties, if there's any kind of visceral response that you're having to the work that you might want to share.
I mean, I love Sarai's work. I mean, I think
I love
I
your
was
work,
a
darling.
fan before. You were one of the first people that I actually met in New Orleans. Dang, it's in the other room. Maybe when we take a break or something, I can bring it. But I bought a journal from you.
Yes, I
Um,
remember.
yeah, and that journal was like just the paper. It just felt so meaningful and intentional, and your work just exudes that. And I think on the first slide, I wrote it down. The story behind my skin piece gave me chills, just because that's a very, very prevalent aspect of the healing that I've had to do in my life, due to colorism.
That's
And
right.
being a dark skinned woman in America is simply,
That's what I'm so
atrocious
happy
in
that
a
that was your
sense,
response to it. Though I didn't mention colorism, that was also part of my reaction to seeing that L'Oreal commercial. Right? Like, what is happening here? And having to really reconcile. So I'm so happy that Felice, that was there for you. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate it. I appreciate any piece, honestly, dedicated to colorism, because I think it's a subject and a topic that we, especially as Black people, push under the rug. And it's interesting with me being from the North, coming to the South, and it's two totally different experiences, but it's still similar in the aspect of darker people just having kind of being at the bottom of the totem pole. And that's actually something that I've been thinking about as well during this pandemic is the story of my skin. Have I actually healed from,
Shit.
the things that have happened in my life? And even with this baby, my partner is between y'all color, and that's actually something that we talked about, and that also interests me. Like, wow, we actually have to talk about this, right? Like,
Yeah.
we actually have to talk about colorism and what that means for our family. What if, the two questions rose up, like, what if our child comes out my color? What if our child comes out your color? Like, how will those dynamics impact um, our family life, and
That's right.
how we then also grow as a unit together to shed off the things that we were taught. So I really, 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 really enjoyed that piece. Like, that one was definitely one that I truly connected with.
Oh, thank you.
I love also that you brought up colorism. It's something that I'm always kind of very much thinking about in my own life, but also the way that it plays out in visual work and language, and the way in which artists, in particular Black artists, get to talk about themselves, their identity in their work. Like literally whether or not an artist chooses to insert, those pain points, and how they want to share particular like vulnerabilities in their work or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or to put up a protective skin. And I think for me,
Yes.
something really interesting about visual work in that, you get to play with that language by putting on different skins and different masks and different ways that you can layer, right? And build up these canvases, these papers, these pieces. Soraya, I know that you are a really brilliant colorist, and you
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
vibrant colors. And
Mhm.
I know that that's a part of, some other theme of whether or not there's a shared aesthetic. And I guess I want to ask both of you, when thinking about Afrofuturism or futurist notions of Black people, and thinking about your own work for both of you, how are you thinking about your use of aesthetic? Do you think that
Yes.
there is a shared aesthetic among Black people? Is there a thread? What are your thoughts on that? And then I'm gonna take us back to so folks can see our faces.
Oh, seems like
Um,
Sarai, you.
you good if I go?
Yeah, go ahead, lovely.
Okay. Thank you, darling. So I usually love this conversation of aesthetics when it comes up because it reminds me of always what I want to share about it, how I feel about it, and that it is a feeling, right? I think I've shared this with Gia before. I think I question it was somebody else's panel and it was Q&A and I asked this question, and I added with a comment like I do. I talk a lot sometimes, and I talk about aesthetics as not just this topical thing, right? It is not just what we experience with our vision, with our eyes, with our sight. It's much deeper than that. It is the opposite of anesthetic. Anesthetic, which is to be numb without feeling, right? To not have feeling, to have that stripped away, for very practical and good reasons that could be very useful, right? To be anesthetized. Um, think about when you're having major surgery, or think about how you manage pain, right? There's all kinds of reasons why that is a powerful process, or a tool that we have available to us. In terms of a visual scholarship and an aesthetic of Blackness, what we're dealing with is the opposite of anesthesia. It is an aesthetic is to be full of life. It's to be full of feeling. It is to be vibrant, right? It is to be full of what can be imagined and what can be experienced with not just our vision, but what we can experience with our minds. So that's where that goes, right? That's where that expression is. It's not just the minds, but it's the full personhood. But our brain is what processes the information that we receive. So I do believe that there is a Black aesthetic, because if we're using the definition that I've just presented, then Blackness is beyond what it looks like. It is a feeling, it is a history, it is a vibrancy, it is a life, it is a reality that encompasses everything. So an aesthetic just is not just topical, right? It is the topography of a life, of our lives. And so it is what we experience when we think about our African diaspora. It's why colorism becomes a problem, right? It's why the white gaze is a problem, right? It's why sexism and white supremacy are problems. It's why capitalism is a problem that we need to address. And we do that through our cultural dynamic and nuanced perspectives. And this is why it cannot just be, I mean, this is evident, this is just evident in just everyday living. This is practical, right? This is what is natural. And I think for my work, it's really important for me to keep challenging myself to remain in the state of what is natural, what is real for me, what is an offering to my existence and my existing as a Black, Indigenous, Haitian, queer, immigrant. I can keep going, right? Keep going and going.
Right.
Woman,
And
right? And right? And this is why an Afro-feminist, fortuitous mindset is beneficial, because I know it cannot be. I actually would not allow it to be that, right? That doesn't even fit into my reality for it to just be a flat thing. It's not a flat thing. It's full of body. It's full of life. So there is a Black aesthetic,
yeah.
and we know that that Black aesthetic is connected to why, again, this is not. I'm not saying anything new. How we survive, how we survive. You know, the nastiness, the mess, the trauma, and the terrorizing of what white supremacy has done. And this is how we reckon with it. You know, you just had a piece up called "We Will Not Be Erased," right? That piece, in that piece, the viewer has an invitation to, and you realize I'm using the same title of a picture that I found, a beautiful, darling picture of Jordan Davis, who we know was tragically murdered, right? And in this current moment, how interesting that speaks to this moment right now.
Soraya, thank you for literally kind of crystallizing that. And I want to point out that I'm checking the time.
Yes. Sorry.
No sorries in this space at all. I wanna just say really quickly, will both of you share, if people are interested in purchasing your work, supporting you as a patron, how can they get in touch with you? What are the best ways? And then I want to hold space for us to like leave with this beautiful soundscape and put
Yes.
Funkay's link, and let everyone know that on Facebook, Afrofuture Society will be posting Soraya's information and Felice and Funkay's information, because we want to make sure that you can support our culture bearers and our artists in this city. And we want to make sure to shout out Embrace the Culture virtual series that is really directly supporting artists. So share with us, how can we purchase your work, know more about what you're doing?
So you can directly email me. A website is something that I have actually been challenged to do for many years, because as you know, Gia, when you have multiple hats, adding one more thing to that list can tip it all the way over, right?
Absolutely.
But I think right now is actually a good time for me to really kind of get back in touch with that. So for now, what you can do is email me at sorayagmlewis@gmail.com. You can find my artist page on Facebook is Ancestral Alchemy by SJLM on Facebook. I have a private Facebook and I have the artist page Facebook. And so those are the best two ways to find me. I
Yes.
think I have a couple of pieces original pieces that I'm willing to sell. And then a lot of the work I have in print, which is like the, kind of the seems to be more accessible to folks, print work. But I do welcome folks who are interested in purchasing original work as well. Thank you, Gia.
Excellent. And we've got your social media handle picked, on the screen right now. We definitely want you to go and support Soraya's work. As this multifaceted Afro-femme futurist. Felice,
yes.
Tell us how we can connect with you, learn more about your work, purchase your work, become supporters and patrons of your work.
Yes, well, you can definitely follow me on Instagram. My handle is right there at Felice Flow. I mentioned before I wear many hats, so definitely not doing any DJ events right now, but I am offering community yoga classes at the moment every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 5 p.m., which has been so amazing to just kind of hold space in a new way and reimagine what that looks like even as a yoga teacher in guiding. So that's another way as well. My website, this is definitely encouraging me to update my website, but I had two prints at the New Orleans African American Museum that I think they actually probably still have that are definitely for sale. And I also have a project specific Instagram at we_of_. Again, that's at we_of_. And you can find more information and more interactive communication with me there.
Yay, I can't wait to check it all out.
I just want to thank you both so much for being here on a rainy Friday. This seems really beautiful after the full moon in Scorpio.
Oh, my goodness.
Right?
And Oya is definitely active.
Right.
It's active. Felice, we're sending you good, big, beautiful birthing stories. We want to thank Mayor LaToya Cantrell again for her work during this time and just being clear and advocating for us and holding it down.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, the Office of Cultural Economy, Lisa Harris, and Lisa Harris and Alana. We want to thank the entire team, and we want to thank culture bearers in the city. We had an opportunity to share and have this platform, but we know that there's so many. This is a city of creatives, of fierce creatives, and we want to just thank you for your work. And I would encourage folks to reach out to your culture bearers and just do something kind. Ask them what they need, because they are the reason that people come to this city, right? And we want to make sure that we are extending community. And just really finally, I want to thank the New Orleans African American Museum for hosting this exhibition from last year through March. If you are interested, please support the New Orleans African American Museum by making a donation. You can go to the website, www.noaam.org. We were thrilled to have the show there, hoping that this show travels. There are a couple places that we're thinking it's going to go. And we want to end by just honoring Funke and her beautiful soundscape. And so we're just going to go out with her bio on. And so you'll give me a moment.
Each time my blood, sweat, and tears are polluted and poisoned by the careless games and toys. And this is only the beginning of my story. My power is fading. Usurped fatherhood, mother earth's now a plaything. For the ungrateful child, so cold. 10 billion for my tears. I long for the once adoring embrace of my children. Their prayers, their care, tenderness has now turned loveless. The embrace, now an anaconda's grip on earth flowing swift with the killing. Killing is a sport. Fun with fire in my wondrous rainforest, respect and neglect they had for their main source. They slaughter their siblings, blossoms and peace like the first murder of Cain. Their pure sister oceans will never be the same due to daily spoil and brother skies choke on oil, refinery, factory smoke. The Mother Earth family got no use crying now. My power is fading. Usurped by the Mother Earth now a plaything for the ungrateful child so cold. pen base, my tears. But I'll continue to spin until my curious Homo sapien offspring pay the price for their sins. Against my tainted tears, my breathless breath, and once fertile skins. My sorrows are many and murderous. They kill, I kill 1 million plus. I never wanted to hurt my children, but our Creator makes me take me back. It's the circle of life, or at least it was. No, no, it's too late for repentance. Accept your death sentence. I've given you all I can. Such beauty in life, you'll never have again. Now it's the end. Now it's the end. Now it's the end. Now it's the end.